Hello, Del Ballou back again. This is session 2 on how to paint a beach scene. And I'm doing this video for my class, which meets once a week. But of course, anyone is welcome to join in on this video presentation and tutorial. Now, I had started this in session 1, and because of the glare from the light above, I, I had to rethink this. So this is session 2. Now what I have done is to go over those clouds which I had in session 1, and I'm using a fairly large white bristle brush, and I'm putting white paint on in a specific manner, and then I will go back with a softer brush and with a darker color to create the shadows from the clouds. And what I've also done is add a slight touch of yellow to um, to indicate that these clouds are picking up light from the sun. Now, when I've done these clouds, while I still have my masking tape on, I'm going to put a background color for my sand. My water is principally going to be going right here where this masking tape is, and I'm not going to go all the way up to the tape, but this will keep me from having to do that at a later point. So now on for the clouds. Now I'm not using any medium to speak of, and this is going to be making some noise, but just to show you. Now what you don't want to do is to maintain the same pressure and the same stroke. Got some fuzz on my brush as you go along. And you don't want to come too far down because you need that contrast from the blue that we're going to put below. And I don't want to get too complicated with these clouds. Now, the clouds over here are going to have sea oats coming up into them, so they definitely do not need to be very busy. And you will realize after you have looked at several YouTube videos on how to make clouds that each artist has his or her own way of achieving clouds. As I said in the other video, some people begin with the white of the clouds and then fill in the shadows. Some start with the shadows and move up, but it really doesn't matter as long as you achieve what it is you like. Now, knowing that I'm going to have sea oats coming up in here, I want to consider how much contrast I want. So you need to always be thinking about where you're going next with your painting. And so now I'm dropping in some shadow shapes. And do keep in mind, just like the foliage on the tree, you want shapes of color. And I'm using a mixture of cobalt blue and white and a little bit of cadmium red to gray this down somewhat. But you can see that as I work on the canvas, it changes shape and changes tone and value actually. I'm going to break that up a little bit. And I've actually decided that I'm going to pretty much bring this shadow color all the way down. I just don't want these clouds to be too complicated. I'm just adding the color for the shadow right now. I'm not trying to fix the white of the clouds. Don't have very much medium in my brush for this part. I get sort of a light dusting of some clouds over here. I don't have quite enough. A little too dusty. But the placement of the clouds, the intensity of the clouds, and even the complication of the clouds depends entirely on personal choice. Now I have a little bit of medium, liquid medium. To give me something to work with here. Just remember that You need contrast in your painting, which in this case is the difference between highlights and shadows. And how you achieve that actually comes with practice. So you're right in here. It's a little bit too yellow, but just leave that on the top. These are some black back clouds over here. These are my highlights. And they're going to go, for the most part, on this side of the clouds because the sun is coming from that direction. Sometimes you have to be a little bit careful because eventually you'll run out of that fresh paint on your brush, and you'll also be diminishing your highlights. One thing I don't want to do is have my clouds leaning too much one way or the other, because that might suggest that the wind is blowing harder in one direction or the other. In the case of these sea oats, I want them to be bending toward the center of the painting. So I don't want to imply that the wind is blowing these clouds in a different direction. So it's really best that they sort of stand upright. Highlighting is a little bit different than that. And put just the slightest touch of alizarin crimson. Just because I like alizarin crimson. And it gives me a slightly different shadow color to work with. And of course, as you continue to work it in, it will be less visible. Sometimes that's advisable, sometimes not, because I have mentioned how you really don't want to over blend your colors. And in this case, that looks like just enough. I might change that so it doesn't look too much like a hole. And while I have this color on my brush, this little bit of alizarin, I can go through and add a little bit of that to my shadow colors to add interest. I hope where you are today, it is as beautiful as it is here. I know some folks in Colorado got more than they bargained for in the way of snow. And here it is almost April. I remember that from living in Pennsylvania. The first year I was there, it snowed in April and a little bit the first part of May. And I thought to myself, okay, enough of that. I didn't mind the snow. What I minded was the length of the winter. I had a very large beach scene. I'm talking like 5 feet by 6 feet. And when I sold my house in Pennsylvania, my agent loved it. So I gave it to her. I was so grateful for her selling my house. Wasn't sure where I was going when she sold it, but I was really grateful that she did. And it turned out in about a month's time, the Lord gave me clearance to come back to the sunny South. And while I was very happy when I was in Pennsylvania, I was equally happy when the time came for me to come back south. And today I suspect would be a very good day at the beach. Now I still think that this sky could use a little bit more work. But I'm going to put on the the sand color, just as I mentioned. Sorry, I failed to move this back over to see that I'm trying to minimize these clouds slightly without making them too different from the other side. And actually, I've just realized that I've gone over the time I wanted to spend, because it takes a while for these to upload. So I'm going to do the sand on the next session. So thank you for watching, and I'll be back.